I can still remember that night vividly, the thrill, the adrenaline, the intoxicating sense of freedom that I thought I deserved. It started innocently enough, a casual drink at a bar with coworkers, laughter flowing freely, flirtatious glances exchanged across the table. I had been feeling trapped for months, suffocated by routine, monotony, and the constant expectations of marriage. My husband, though loving in his own way, had become predictable, and I craved excitement, unpredictability, and the kind of attention I hadn't realized I was missing. By the time the bar closed, I was tipsy, emboldened by the alcohol and the flattery of two strangers who had been lingering around our group. They were charming, witty, and completely unlike the man I had married. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, I agreed to continue the evening with them. Just one night, I told myself. A harmless escape, a fleeting taste of adventure. We ended up at a hotel, the dim lights casting shadows that seemed to heighten the excitement. Everything felt surreal, intoxicating, and reckless. I let go of all caution, forgetting that choices have consequences, that actions, even momentary ones, carry weight far beyond the thrill of the moment. The next morning, I woke with a pounding headache, the haze of alcohol and adrenaline leaving me disoriented. Panic set in as I realized the full extent of my recklessness. One of the strangers had been aggressive, careless, and now I was injured, frightened, and unsure of the safety I had assumed I could control. I called for help and ended up in the ER, feeling vulnerable and ashamed, my head spinning from more than just the alcohol. What I didn't expect was the calm, devastating clarity with which my husband reacted. He didn't scream. He didn't confront me with accusations immediately. Instead, he left, not in a fit of rage, but with quiet determination, packing his things and walking out of our home without a word. I didn't understand it at first. I thought he would be worried, angry, maybe even forgiving after seeing me scared and vulnerable. I thought he would realize that the danger I had been in was not premeditated, that it was a moment of weakness, a lapse in judgment. But he didn't. He had always known, deep down, that our marriage was built on trust, and that trust, I realized too late, was completely shattered. In the days that followed, he ignored my messages, blocked my calls, and refused to discuss reconciliation. The lawyer's letter arrived quietly, methodically, confirming that he had filed for divorce. The clarity of his actions, his lack of drama, and his unwavering resolve hit me harder than any shouting match could have. This was not punishment, it was consequences, cold, logical, and inescapable. I tried to reason with myself, to rationalize what I had done. I told myself it was just one night, a lapse, a mistake, but the truth was undeniable. I had betrayed him in the most intimate, unforgivable way. I had replaced the bond of marriage with fleeting excitement, and the cost was everything. I began to reflect on the months and years leading up to that night. The small signs I had ignored, the subtle dissatisfaction I had nursed, the resentment I had harbored, all of it had culminated in that reckless decision. I had thought I was seeking freedom, but in reality I was abandoning responsibility, security, and the life I had promised to uphold. The ER became a symbol of everything I had lost. It wasn't just a place of physical healing, it was a stark reminder of emotional devastation, of the trust I had destroyed and the irreversible damage I had caused. Every needle, every monitor, every concerned glance from the staff reminded me that I had brought myself to a moment of vulnerability that my husband could not overlook, forgive, or forget. As the divorce proceedings progressed, I was forced to confront the full weight of my actions. Financial arrangements, custody discussions, and legal obligations replaced the casual, careless life I had assumed I could return to. The man I had taken for granted, the one I had assumed would always be there, had disappeared from my life with a clarity and decisiveness I had never imagined. Months later, I was still grappling with the aftermath. Friends offered sympathy, but it felt hollow. Advice seemed meaningless. I realized that this was a lesson I had to internalize fully. Freedom without responsibility is destruction. Thrill without loyalty is isolation. And betrayal carries consequences far beyond the moment it occurs. Even now, I replay that night in my head, the sequence of choices that led to the ER, the strangers, and ultimately the collapse of my marriage. I still don't fully understand why he left so quietly, so decisively. Perhaps it was because he never needed theatrics to show his disappointment. Perhaps it was because he knew that the betrayal itself was enough. The truth is simple. I had chosen excitement over commitment, desire over loyalty, and the consequences were absolute. My husband's absence, once a source of confusion and anger, became a mirror reflecting the depth of my mistake. The life I had taken for granted, the love I had assumed was unshakable, was gone, not because he acted impulsively, but because my actions demanded such clarity and finality. In the months that followed, I began to rebuild my life, alone, cautiously, painfully aware of the trust I had destroyed. Every friendship, every relationship, every decision carried the weight of my past recklessness. I learned the cost of betrayal in a way that cannot be taught or forgiven easily. Even now, when I recall that night, the ER, and the moment he walked away, I feel a mixture of shame, confusion, and regret. I understand that freedom, thrill, and excitement are meaningless without responsibility, trust, and respect. I understand that some actions, once taken, cannot be undone, and some consequences, once faced, cannot be escaped. He left me not out of anger, not out of malice, but out of a rational clarity that I could not match. And perhaps that is the hardest truth of all. That betrayal, even when impulsive and unplanned, can end a life, a marriage, and a trust in ways that are irreversible. I ended up in the ER that night seeking help, but what I truly needed was understanding, accountability, and reflection. What I received instead was the consequence of my choices, the end of a marriage, the loss of a partner, and a lifetime lesson about the weight of infidelity, trust, and respect. And still, even now, I don't fully understand why he left. Maybe some actions are so definitive that they speak louder than any words, louder than any explanation. Maybe some betrayals are so deep that silence and absence are the only appropriate responses. But one thing is certain, that night changed everything, and the repercussions of my choices will stay with me forever.